Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Treuer Gott, ich muss dir klagen, which translates to, Faithful God, I must lament to you. All in all, it's a pretty straightforward chorale. Everything more or less functions the way it's supposed to, except for this ascending bass line here, this chromatic bass line. We'll get to it when we get there, but really there's not much to say. We should just hop into the analysis. So we start on C major, we end on C major. I reckon we're in the key of C major. However, our first cadence is a perfect authentic cadence, or at least I hear it to be a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major. We start off with our C major triad and root position. We then go to G, B, G, and D, which is a root position G major triad or a 5 chord. Then we have C, C, G, and E, which is a tonic triad in root position again, C major. We then have D, G, and D, which is a G major triad in first inversion. So that's 5, 6. However, I think because we're going to the key of G major, we can go ahead and call this a tonic triad in first inversion as well. Then we have A, E, A, and C, which we would be tempted to call a 2 chord, but to be consistent with the other analyses I've done, I really think this F sharp is what's dominating this beat here. So I'm seeing it as F sharp, A, and C, which is a F sharp diminished triad in first inversion, which I'll call 7, 6. And especially when it's being linked to another tonic triad, I think it's more likely that this is a 7, 6 chord rather than a 2. But if you hear that as a 2, by all means, analyze it that way. We then have G, G, D, and B. That's our tonic triad in root position. We have D, G, D, and A. This G being an accented non-chord tone, which is like a 4-3 suspension over the bass. This is just a big D major triad, which is 5. And then we cadence on 1, which is G major in root position. Okay, next we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of C major. I think, perfect authentic cadences in the key of the dominant often function the same as a half cadence. They just sound a little bit more tonicized. We get a lot of F sharps throughout here, which makes the modulations seem more final, more so than what a tonicization would do. So we'll just go ahead and call this G major triad our 5 now in the key of C, especially because it goes to a C major triad next. E, C, G, and C, which is a tonic triad in first inversion. We then have D, F, A, and D. Similar to this chord right here, I think what we're really looking at is the B here, B, D, and F, which is a B diminished triad in first inversion, but you could also call it a 2 chord depending on how you hear it. We then have C, G, C, and E, which is our tonic triad and for root position. We then have B, D, G, and D. Some ornamental tones going on here. It's a 5 chord, G major over B, so that's first inversion. And then we have C, D, G, and E, with this D being a 9/8 suspension over the bass, so this is just a tonic triad, C major. We then have G, C, G, and D, this C being a 4-3 suspension over the bass. This is just a G major chord, root position. And then we have our tonic triad, which is C major again. Okay, looking ahead, we have kind of an interesting cadence. We have a half cadence in what I hear as the key of D minor, which isn't a too far away key. It's only 1 flat, so it is related. But I don't think we modulate immediately. We have some other things that go on. We have another tonic triad here, so no need to reanalyze. We have A, C, A, and F, which is an F major triad in first inversion, so 4, 6. This B flat, however, is kind of interesting. It's starting to hint at the idea of D minor, so maybe we can say that it happens here, and we can call this now our 3 chord in the key of D minor. We then have E, C, B flat, and G. That's a C chord. Some people might call this 7. I might call this 5, 6, 5 of 3, but you might call this 7, 6, 5, depending on how you hear it. But it inevitably goes to 3. And the reason why I don't think we're going to F major and we're going to D minor is more so what precedes it or what succeeds it. We have C, E, G, and E afterwards, which is C sharp diminished. However, this A right here on this beat makes me feel like this is more so an A dominant 7 chord, which would be 5, 6, 5. And it's more common for 3 to go to 5 anyways in Bach's music. It's not totally uncommon, but it happens enough for it to be something that's part of his regular vocabulary, especially when we're bringing in the idea of the relative minor. And that goes to D minor, D, A, F, and D, which is our, D minor triad, tonic triad, passing tone going up, melodic minor. And then we have A and G sharp, and this G sharp right here, we have G sharp, B, and D, which is a kind of like a 7, 6, 4 of 5. The G sharp makes it feel like we have a little bit of a diminished leading tone chord of the dominant, which we eventually cadence on. But half cadences are usually pretty, it's not really defined so much by what precedes it, more so the fact that we do cadence on 5. Moving along to the next phrase, we have a half cadence in the key of C major. And interestingly enough, I think we have a direct modulation here. There's really nothing that smoothly connects A major and C major. It's just a new phrase, new idea. We start with our tonic triad, passing tone in the alto, the tenor. Then we have C, E, E, and G. And apologies, this is in first inversion because the E is in the bass and it turns into root position here before we get an F major triad, F, F, A, F, F, C, and A rather. So that's a root position 4 chord, passing 7th in the tenor again. Then we have G, D, B, and G. Root position G major triad, that's our 5 chord. We then have A, C, A, and F, that is 4, 6. We have a little bit of a deceptive progression. And notice when 4, 6 goes to our tonic, which is C, C, G, and E, which happens right here, we have the leading tone connecting the 2 chords. So a lot of times we'll have a passing 7th chord here, but because we have B, C, A, and F, the C would need to be a D, and that would also bridge the gap between the C and this C right here, but because, or this C and this C, which would be an E, but because that those 2 tones are static, there's no need for that voice to move. But then we have a neighboring chromatic tone, which introduces the idea of the secondary leading tone here, but it's really just ornamental because we don't get a full chord. Well, actually, we do, because we don't need the 3rd in the context of diminished. We have another situation again where we have 7, in this case 7, 4, 3, but still a second inversion 7 chord of 5 before we cadence on 5. Alright, looking ahead, we have a imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor, or at least that's what I hear it as, but it is kind of a warbly progression. It's not super strong. Here we have C, C, G, and E, which is our tonic triad in C major, and from this point forward we're sort of looking for a point where we're going to modulate to A minor, but it'll ultimately depend on what follows afterwards. We have C, E, C, and G, just another tonic triad, no need to reanalyze, passing 7th in the alto. We have D, F, A, and F, and one might be tempted to call this a 2 chord again, but I really do think this is, sorry, I put parentheses wrong, the wrong analysis. I do think that probably the way to label this is 7, 6. And you might think of it as 2, but especially when one tonic triad is going to another tonic triad, right? E, G, C, and E, which is our tonic triad. And first inversion, usually it makes more sense for the dominant to link the 2 rather than a 2 chord. We then have F, A, and C, which is our 4 chord, F major. We leap up to E here. We then have F sharp, D, A, and B. And honestly, really the modulation could happen at any point. It's quite possible that this E minor right here, I'm going to go ahead and say that we modulate here because there's really no pretty way to analyze it. It's going to look like a wonky progression. But we'll call this F major chord our 6 in the key of A minor instead of 4. We have F sharp, D, A, and D, which is a D major triad in first inversion, which is 5/6 of, oh, apologies. I'm going to go ahead and actually walk that back and say that we're in the key of C major still, and we're going to call this 5/6 of 5. Before we go to E minor, which is G, B, B, and E. So instead of going to 5, we get a deceptive progression of 5/6 of 5 going to 6. And then we get the G sharp in the bass, G sharp, B, E, and E, which is 5 of 6, or more specifically 5/6 of 6 in the key of C major. And sorry, this E minor triad is not 6. This E minor triad is 3/6. And now if we're in the key of A minor, this is just 5/6 before we cadence on 1. A minor, A, E, and C. And this is imperfect authentic because of the lack of the tonic in the melody. Alright, moving along, we have an interesting progression again. I think also just for this phrase, you could analyze it in the key of A minor, like throughout this entire section. You could call this 6. You can call this D major chord 4/6 or 5 of 7. You can call this E minor chord 5/6 lowercase, and then we can get uppercase 5/6, and then we can get 1. So I think that's an alternative analysis of how you could do it, and this F sharp is just a byproduct of melodic minor. But I'll stay consistent and say that the analysis doesn't really, or the modulation doesn't really fully sound like it's happening until we hear the G sharp. Like the F sharp is a tone that we've heard in the past, it's in our ears, but this G sharp is new. Actually, I take that back, that G sharp has been heard before, but it's being recontextualized here, and the modulation just doesn't really it doesn't sound like it's happening until the latter part of the phrase anyways, so. Okay. The melody also really just highlights C major over A minor anyways, so it really sounds like more so like cadencing on 6 rather than cadencing on 1 to me, but because that's not really something that's conventional from an analytical perspective, I had to sort of force this modulation onto it, and ultimately it articulates the same thing. That's just one other way to look at it. Okay, so I think we're moving to the key of C. I think it's possible that this A minor triad is now possibly our 6th chord in the key of C major. And then we have G, B flat, E, G, and E. With the passing tone here, and we can call that E diminished, which is 7/6, or E diminished over G, which is 7/6 of 4. And then interestingly enough, we get C, E, B flat, and G, which is 5/7 of 4. You could even just lump all of this section into just 5/7 of 4 if you wanted to, because really all this E diminished chord is just a 5/7 chord without the root, and the root just gets added here. But the fact that they're one after the other is very unusual. It's also very unusual because we get D, F, A, and F here. And to stay consistent with my analysis, I think this is a B diminished chord, 7/6, but it's also very possible we go to 2. So if you look at this in the key of F major, this is just 7/6, 5/7, 6. If you treat this 7/6 chord like I think it's a 7/6 chord, like a 2, and we just have a deceptive progression, but staying consistent with the way that I've labeled it up until this point, 7/6 chords, especially when they go to a tonic, right? E, G, C, and E, which is our tonic. We always see these 7/6 chords followed by a tonic triad, which is why it makes more sense to me to call it a 7/6 chord than a 2 chord, because 2 is less likely to go to 1 than a 7 is. We have some passing tones in the lower voices. We have G, B, G, and D, which is our our dominant triad, G major. We then have a passing seventh in the bass, E, C, G, and C. That's our tonic triad in first inversion, C major over E. That gets turned into root position on beat 4 and. Then we have G, C, G, and D, which is this C is like a 4-3 suspension over the bass, or an accented non-chord tone, however you look at it. I think this is more of a suspension because it happens over a longer rhythmic window of time. So this is really just a big 5 chord. A really big 5 chord that resolves on beat 2, and then we ultimately on cadence on 1 in a perfect authentic cadence in the tonic key. So other than, there's actually, I'm not going to sell this chorale short. It has its moments, right? We have this really interesting modulation to D minor here that half cadences on A major, and then we get an imperfect authentic cadence on A minor that's very brief. It's like, I guess there are ways to analyze it in the key of A minor from earlier on, and this analysis looks more and more appropriate to me the longer I look at it. But yeah, I'm going to stick to this analysis because they both more or less articulate the same thing. To me, it does not sound like the piece is modulated by the time we hear the F. The G sharp is what really brings A minor into context, as a tonic at least. But all in all, harmony pretty much functions the way that you would expect it to. You have some weird progressions like 3 to 5, even though this is a somewhat normal progression in Bach's music. But we have like this ascending bass line that's not really even like conventionally harmonizable using purely tonal language. So Bach really had to write outside the lines here. Then we have this interesting section where we sort of morph to F major but never get the modulation. Or it's not even necessarily we don't get the modulation, we never get the resolution. That's what I was trying to say. We are tonicizing 4 and then we get D minor, which I ultimately called B diminished because of the fact that these chords ultimately just preceded as C major chords. So yeah, lots of interesting things in this chorale actually. I'm definitely not going to sell it short. But on that note, I will leave you all with that. I hope you enjoyed the analysis. I hope you're enjoying the videos. This is episode 90. I can't believe I've made 90 of these. It's crazy. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by watching my videos as well. I appreciate it so much. It's really awesome to see that people are watching the videos and enjoying them. So definitely stay tuned for more because there's going to be a ton, like literally a ton. And on that note, thank you again for supporting the channel, and I hope you take care.